My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 32 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon. I work as a pediatric nurse, and my greatest flaw, pause. I've always been too forgiving, but on Christmas night last year, forgiveness finally died inside me. That night, something else was born, something sharp, cold, and unstoppable. Christmas in Portland is supposed to feel magical. Snow dusting the sidewalks, pine wreaths on the doors, the glow of warm houses against a frozen world. But inside my mother's house that evening, it didn't feel magical at all. Her living room smelled like cinnamon and cloves, candles flickering against the garland-strung mantel. The Christmas tree twinkled in gold lights, perfectly decorated with color-coordinated ornaments: red, silver, white. Her kind of perfection. Family gathered around the long oak table, plates full of honey-glazed ham, mashed potatoes, green beans, and my sister's carefully plated desserts. Laughter floated around me, clinking glasses, the hum of familiarity, but in that hum, I was the silence. I always was. It happened so quickly, I almost thought I imagined it. We had just finished dinner. My brother Daniel had stood to give a toast. He was bragging about his promotion in front of everyone, his hand proudly resting on his fiance's shoulder. Mom's eyes gleamed with pride, soaking in every word. Then her gaze shifted to me, and her smile died. She set her glass down with a deliberate clink. The sound cut through the laughter. Suddenly, the room fell quiet, like everyone knew what was about to happen. "Claire," she said. Her voice was syrupy, but sharp underneath. "You've always been the most useless child I have." The words landed like a slap. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, eyes burning. The room went silent except for the faint Christmas carol playing from the kitchen radio. Daniel cleared his throat nervously. My sister glanced down at her lap. My aunt sipped her wine. No one said a thing. No one ever did. I tried to laugh it off. My voice trembled. "Mom, what are you even talking about?" She leaned back in her chair, smirking. "You heard me. Daniel's a manager now. Emily just got her own bakery. And you," she waved her hand like she was brushing crumbs from a table, "you're still a nurse. No husband, no children, nothing to show for your life." Her tone was casual, almost bored. I whispered, "I save children's lives every day." She chuckled bitterly. "And yet you can't save your own. You've always been the disappointment, Claire. The one we never brag about at Christmas." Gasps rippled softly around the table. Someone muttered, "Mom, stop." But it faded into nothing. I sat there, frozen in humiliation. You know that feeling when you want to disappear? When your skin burns, your ears ring, and every breath feels like swallowing glass? That was me. A grown woman, sitting at her mother's Christmas table, being carved open in front of everyone I loved. I wanted to cry, but tears would have been proof that she won. So instead, I smiled. A small, tight, bitter smile. I looked her straight in the eyes, and I said softly but firmly, "You'll regret saying that." The room went still. Daniel shifted in his seat. My sister's fork clattered against her plate. Even my aunt set her glass down, startled. But my mother? She laughed, a cruel, dismissive laugh that echoed against the twinkling tree. "Oh, Claire," she sneered, "you don't have it in you. You never did." Her words stung, but deep inside me, something shifted. She was wrong. I did have it in me. And on that Christmas night, as the snow piled high outside and the fire cracked in the hearth, I quietly made a vow. my silence wouldn't be weakness anymore. It would be my weapon. She thought she humiliated me, but really, she had just given me the perfect stage, because when I finally answered back, she would never forget it. If you're still listening, maybe you felt this too. The sting of being silenced, the weight of being invisible. Whisper subscribe because the next part of my story will cut even deeper. My name is Claire Whitman, and if you really want to understand why Christmas night shattered me, you need to know where I came from, because humiliation didn't start that night. It started long before. I grew up in a small craftsman-style house on the east side of Portland. The walls were always decorated with perfect family portraits, except if you look closely, you could see the imbalance. Daniel in the center, Emily right next to him, smiling, proud, highlighted, and me, slightly off to the side, a step back, my smile a little smaller. Like even the photographer knew who belonged in the spotlight and who didn't. Mom had a way of making sure I never forgot my place. When Daniel scored a soccer goal, she clapped so loud the neighbors probably heard. When Emily won her spelling bee, she baked a cake with her name written in frosting. When I brought home a painting from art class, she glanced at it, muttered, "Messy colors," and tossed it on the kitchen counter under a pile of unopened mail. I was 8 years old, and I learned something that day. My mother's pride was a currency, and I would never be rich enough to earn it. I still remember one particular Saturday morning. I was 10. I had spent the whole week practicing a piano piece for the school recital. My fingers ached from the keys. I wanted her to be proud. "Mom," I said shyly, standing in the living room, "will you listen to me play?" She was on the couch, folding laundry. Without looking up, she sighed. "Not now, Claire. I have too much to do." "But it'll only take 3 minutes," I pleaded. Finally, she set the laundry aside, but her eyes weren't on me. They were on the clock. "Fine. Play. Make it quick." My fingers trembled as I played. I made only one mistake, a wrong note. In the middle, when I finished, I looked up, heart racing. "What did you think?" I whispered. She stood, gathered the folded towels, and said flatly, "Well, you'll never be Emily, but keep practicing." Then she walked away. I sat at the piano bench, staring at the keys, my small hands shaking. That was the first time I realized I would never be enough, not for her. Daniel was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. Football star, straight A student, the future man of the house. Emily was the darling, sweet, charming, pretty. Mom loved dressing her up, parading her around like a doll. And me? I was the quiet one, the background character in my own family. At T-school, I worked harder than anyone. I stayed late in the library. I aced tests. Teachers praised me, but at home, my achievements vanished in the shadow of my siblings. Why can't you be more like Daniel? Emily never gives me trouble. Why can't you be easier? You're too sensitive, Claire. Toughen up. Every word was a small cut, and by the time I was a teenager, I was covered in invisible scars. Christmas was always the worst. Every year, we'd gather around the tree. Daniel would unwrap something expensive, a new gaming console, a high-end watch. Emily would receive jewelry, clothes, gift cards, and me? I got practical gifts, socks, a planner, once even a second-hand coat. One year, when I was 16, I opened a small box from my mom. Inside was a kitchen timer. "A timer?" I asked, confused. She smiled. "So you can learn how to manage your time better. Maybe then you'll finally get somewhere." Everyone laughed lightly. I forced a smile, my cheeks burning. That was the year I stopped asking for anything. I thought leaving home for college would free me. I studied nursing at Oregon State University. I poured my entire being into it, not because I dreamed of being a nurse at first, but because I wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to show her I was capable of saving lives. But even at graduation, when I walked across that stage in my cap and gown, she barely clapped. Daniel had already started his corporate career. Emily was engaged to a wealthy man, and me? Claire's just a nurse, my mom told relatives that day. Like my 4 years of struggle, sleepless nights, and blood, sweat, and tears were just something. I stayed in Portland after graduation, renting a small one-bedroom apartment. My work was hard, exhausting, but meaningful. Parents hugged me when I cared for their sick children. Kids smiled at me through their paint dot. In those moments, I felt alive. I felt valuable, but my family never asked, never visited, never cared. When I did show up to holidays, my mom always had a way of diminishing me. "Oh, you still haven't found anyone?" she'd ask loudly. "Maybe if you work less, you'd actually have a life." Her words dripped like poison in front of everyone else, and they never defended me. Not once. So when I walked into her house last Christmas, I already knew what awaited me: the judgment, the comparisons, the subtle digs, but I didn't expect the open humiliation. Not like that. Not so blatant, useless. The words still echoed in my head, sharp and cruel, and as I sat there that night, forcing myself to smile, I realized something. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about a lifetime of silence, a lifetime of wounds no one saw, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to make them see. Christmas Eve in Portland has a way of making the air feel like glass. Cold, sharp, fragile. The roads shimmered with frost that night as I drove to my mother's house, the heater in my old Honda groaning. Against the chill dot in the passenger seat sat the one thing I'd spent weeks picking out: a gift for my mom. A soft cashmere shawl I'd saved 3 paychecks for. Deep burgundy, her favorite color. I told myself maybe, just maybe, if she opened it, she'd see that I cared, that I still wanted to bridge the gap. But deep down, I already knew better. Her house glowed like something from a Christmas postcard. Twinkling lights lined the roof. A giant wreath hung on the door. Through the window, I could see people moving, laughing, glasses of wine in hand. I parked at the curb, sat in the silence for a moment, and whispered to myself, "Just get through tonight. Smile. Don't let her win." When I walked inside, the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon hit me. Laughter wrapped around the room. Daniel was there in a crisp suit, Emily in a glittering green dress, their partners by their sides holding wine, looking smug, and then Mom, standing in the kitchen wearing a sparkling red sweater, pearls at her neck, drink in hand. She looked at me, her smile stiff. Well, Claire decided to show up. After all, everyone laughed. My cheeks burned. "Hi, Mom," I said softly, forcing a smile. "Merry Christmas." We gathered at the table, the long oak one we'd eaten at since childhood. Candles flickered, silverware clinked. Daniel went first, boasting about his promotion. Everyone clapped, Mom beaming at him like he was royalty. Emily announced she and her husband were buying a new house. Again, applause. Mom's eyes sparkled, then it was me. The room went quiet. I cleared my throat. Work's been good. Busy, but rewarding. We had this case last week, a little boy with leukemia, and after months of treatment, he's finally in remission. I got to be there when the family got the news. That's nice, Claire, Mom interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. But really, it's just your job. Nothing compared to Daniel's promotion or Emily's new house. The words sliced through me. My chest tightened. Emily giggled. Mom, stop. You'll make her feel bad. But she was smiling as she said it. It happened during dessert. Mom raised her glass of wine, her pearls glinting under the lights. To family, she declared. To Daniel, who's making us proud. To Emily, who's building a beautiful future. Then her eyes landed on me. Her voice hardened, loud enough for everyone to hear, and to Claire, who, well, maybe one day will get her act together. Maybe then she'll actually matter. Laughter erupted. Daniel chuckled into his glass. Emily shook her head like it was harmless fun, but to me, it felt like the room tilted sideways. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, my throat closed. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. Matter, I whispered. No one looked at me. Not one person defended me. The humiliation burned hotter than the fireplace crackling behind me. My whole body shook. Mom, I said softly, my voice trembling. Why would you say that? She looked right at me, smirked, and sipped her wine. Oh, Claire, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke, a joke. The room moved on. Daniel told another story. Emily laughed too loudly. Plates clinked again, but I was gone. Inside, I was collapsing. I excused myself, stood up quietly, and slipped into the hallway. Emily followed. Claire, wait, don't take it so hard. Mom's just. Mom, I turned to her, my voice breaking. Do you even hear yourself? She humiliated me in front of everyone. Emily shrugged, adjusting her dress. Look, you know she doesn't mean it. Don't make it a big deal. You always overreact. And with that, she walked away, back into the warmth and laughter. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the family. Photos lining the wall. Daniel with his football trophies. Emily at her engagement party. Mom smiling proudly in every picture. And me? In most of them, I wasn't even there. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the front door. The cold slapped me in the face. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, tears spilling down my cheeks. My body shook as if I were freezing from the inside out. Why? I whispered into the dark. Why do I keep coming back? Why do I keep letting her do this? For the first time in years, I admitted the truth. I wanted her to love me, and she never would. I looked at the gift I'd brought, the cashmere shawl, wrapped perfectly, with a bow, still sitting on the passenger seat. I thought about giving it to her anyway. Maybe it would soften her. Maybe she'd finally see me, but then I remembered her words. Maybe then she'll actually matter, and something in me snapped. No, I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to sit quietly while she destroyed me piece by piece. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. That Christmas night, my silence died, and in its place, something new was born, something cold, something sharp, something that looked a lot like revenge. The morning after Christmas felt like waking up from a car wreck. My apartment was cold, the heat barely working, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones no matter how many blankets you pulled over yourself. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing her words again and again. Maybe then she'll actually matter. That sentence played on repeat in my head like a cruel song stuck in a loop. I stopped answering calls. I ignored texts from coworkers, friends, even the hospital. For 3 days, I barely left my apartment. I didn't eat much. Coffee and crackers. When I remembered, mostly I sat in the dark, scrolling through old family photos on my phone. In every picture, my mother's hand rested on Daniel's shoulder, on Emily's waist, never on me. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed. Daniel. For a second, I thought maybe he's calling to apologize. I answered with a shaky, "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice casual, almost bored. "Hey, I wanted to ask, you didn't leave your gift at Mom's, did you? She said you stormed out without even giving her anything." I swallowed hard. My voice cracked. "Daniel, she humiliated me in front of everyone. She said I don't matter." Silence on the other end. Then a chuckle. "Claire, that's just Mom. You know how she is. You're always too sensitive." "I'm not sensitive," I snapped, my voice rising. "She said I don't matter, and you all laughed." He sighed. "Look, I don't have time for this. Emily and I are taking Mom out to dinner tonight. She doesn't hold grudges. Claire, you shouldn't either. Just grow up a little, okay?" And then he hung up. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, my whole body trembling. Grow up. That's what he said. Nights were the worst. I'd lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing her laughter. I'd see Daniel smirk, Emily's shrug. I'd hear the clinking of their glasses, the way the room moved on without me like I wasn't even real. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself in the dark, "You do matter. You're not invisible. You're not nothing." But it didn't help. The humiliation was alive inside me, gnawing, festering. One night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom. The overhead light flickered, buzzing like a dying bulb. I looked at my reflection, pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, hair unwashed, lips cracked. I didn't look like me anymore. I whispered to my reflection, "Why are you always the one left behind?" And then I punched the mirror. The glass cracked under my fist, splintering into jagged lines. My knuckles bled. But for the first time since Christmas, I felt awake, because in that shattering, I realized something. Maybe the problem wasn't that she didn't love me. Maybe the problem was that I kept letting her prove it. The next morning, I got out of bed before sunrise. I showered. I scrubbed every inch of myself until my skin burned. I wrapped my bloody knuckles in gauze. Then I sat at my small kitchen table with a notebook. On the first page, I wrote in shaky letters, "Things she's done to me," and I started listing the way she ignored me at every birthday, the way she made excuses not to visit me at college, the way she called me the difficult one, the way she praised Daniel and Emily while dismissing me, the way she humiliated me at Christmas. By the time I stopped writing, 3 pages were filled. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter because now it wasn't just pain. It was evidence. I looked at that list, the pages smeared with my handwriting, and I realized something. I had spent my entire life begging her to see me, and all it had ever brought me was shame. So maybe it was time to stop begging. Maybe it was time to make her see me another way, not with love, not with gifts, but with something she couldn't ignore, something that would pierce her perfect world and shatter it from the inside out. I closed the notebook, pressed my bleeding knuckles against the cover, and whispered, "You're going to remember me, Mom. I promise." And for the first time in years, I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. The kind that only comes from knowing revenge has already begun. The first Monday of January, I walked back into the hospital. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. My coworkers stared, maybe noticing the bruised knuckles under the bandages, maybe noticing the weight I'd lost. But no one asked questions, and that was fine. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted silence. Silence was where my plans could grow. I moved through my shifts like a ghost. 4 drips, blood pressure checks, chart notes. Patients looked at me with tired eyes, and I forced a small smile for them. But inside, every minute was calculation. While I wrapped gauze around a patient's arm, I thought, what's the cleanest way to strike without warning? While I adjusted a monitor, I thought, how do you make someone feel the same shame they gave you? And every night after work, I returned to my apartment, opened my notebook, and added to the list ways to hurt her back. Some ideas were small, childish, ignore her calls forever, cut her out, but none of that felt strong enough. Others were sharper, public humiliation, exposure, truth in the open, because if there was one thing my mother prized above all else, it was her reputation. I didn't speak to her, but I watched. Emily posted pictures on Facebook of their family dinners, mom laughing over wine glasses, Daniel's arm around her shoulders. Each smile made my stomach twist, but it also fueled me. They were building their happy little world, and I was outside of it. But soon, that world would crack. By February, I forced myself back into a routine. Not just work, not just lists. I joined a gym 2 blocks away. At first, the treadmill felt like punishment. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I pushed through. Day after day, the burn turned into strength. Weights in my hands made my body tremble, but the mirror showed change, and every time I gripped the barbell, I thought, you called me weak, invisible, forgettable. Look at me now. The gym wasn't about muscles. It was about reclaiming my body from that night, about rebuilding the version of myself she could no longer dismiss. At work, I volunteered for night shifts. I wanted the quiet, the long empty halls. During those hours, I studied, not medicine, not nursing protocols, but people. I watched how quickly rumors spread among staff, how a single whispered comment in the break room could become gospel by sunrise, and I realized something important. Reputation wasn't destroyed by enemies. It was destroyed by whispers. One night, after a double shift, I walked home through the icy Chicago streets. My breath hung in the air, and the city lights blurred in the frost. I stopped at a cafe, ordered tea, and opened my notebook. This time, I wrote only one line. Make her the punchline, because what she did to me on Christmas wasn't just cruelty, it was theater. She wanted an audience. So my revenge had to be the same. Not violence, not screaming, but a stage, a performance she couldn't escape from. I began digging old neighbors, distant relatives, even mom's book club friends. I reached out under the guise of catching up, and the story spilled out. How she bragged about Daniel's promotion but conveniently forgot about my graduation. How she'd mock Emily behind her back but smiled to her face. How she once spread a rumor about a woman in her church to climb higher in the social circle. Page after page, I collected them, each one another crack in her perfect mask, and with every story, the plan grew sharper. By March, my coworkers started noticing. Claire, you look different, one nurse said quietly. I smiled, just a little. My hair was cleaner, styled. my shoulders straighter. The dark circles under my eyes had faded. Inside, I was still burning, but outside I looked like someone they'd underestimated. Too long, that was part of the plan. Appear steady, appear fine. Until the strike, one evening, I stood by my apartment window, looking down at the snow-covered street. The city was quiet, except for the distant sound of a car horn. I held my notebook, the pages thick now with evidence, stories, whispers, strategies, and for the first time, I whispered not to myself but to her, "You wanted an audience, Mom." Pause, I'll give you one, and I knew the stage was nearly set. Spring crept into Chicago slowly. Snow turned to slush, gray skies lingered, but the air carried a hint of warmth, and with it my plan finally moved from notebook to reality. Began small, almost invisible. At my mother's church, where she was known as the perfect hostess, I slipped a letter into the donation box. Anonymous, handwritten. Have you ever noticed how she talks about you when you're not around? Inside, I included one of the stories I'd gathered, word for word, a quote she'd said about a friend's weight, about another's divorce. It wasn't explosive, not yet, but it was the first fracture. A week later, I sent a bouquet of lilies to her office. The card only said, "To the woman who raised 3 children, 2 she loves, and 1 she despises." No name, no sender, but I knew she would think of me, and she would wonder who else knew. Emily, my sister, was always posting family photos. Easter brunch, Mom in her pastel dress, Daniel in his crisp shirt. So I made a new profile. Fake name, blank picture, and under the photo, I wrote a comment. Funny how a mother can smile for the camera while destroying her own daughter behind the scenes. It stayed up for exactly 3 hours before Emily deleted it. But 3 hours was enough. Enough for cousins, neighbors, old classmates to see it. Enough for whispers to begin. By May, the city had thawed. I ran into my mother by accident or maybe fate at a grocery store. She froze when she saw me. Her hand tightened around the cart. "Claire," she said. Her voice was clipped, almost trembling. "What have you done?" I tilted my head. Calm, controlled. "What do you mean, Mom? Don't play games with me," she hissed. "People are talking. At church, at work. Even Emily is asking questions." I leaned closer, just enough so only she could hear. "Then maybe, Mom, you should start answering them." Her face drained of color, and for the first time in my life I watched her stumble. But the real exposure happened in June. Mom loved throwing summer dinner parties in her backyard. Fairy lights, long tables, expensive wine. It was her stage, her kingdom. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need to be. Through a friend of a friend, I slipped an envelope into the stack of mail on her counter, knowing she'd open it just before the party. Inside were printed screenshots of Emily's deleted post. The comments, the likes, the people who'd seen it. No explanation, no note, just proof that her mask was slipping. That night, when guests filled her yard, she smiled too wide, laughed too loud. But I knew she was terrified, because every glance, every whisper, she wondered, "Do they know?" Emily texted me 2 days later, "Claire, what's going on? Mom is acting crazy. She said someone is spreading lies about her. Is it you?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed back, "Not lies, just truth," and I left it at that. By July, Mom was unraveling. She called me 3 times in one night. I didn't answer. Finally, she left a voicemail. Her voice was sharp, shaking. Claire, you don't understand what you're doing. You're destroying this family. If you think this will make you happy, you're wrong. You'll always be nothing without us. I played that message over and over. Her words were poison, but they didn't break me anymore. They fueled me, because now she wasn't just cruel. She was afraid. One hot August evening, I sat on my balcony, the city buzzing below me, and opened my notebook one last time. The pages were full. The whispers had spread. Her name was bruised, her smile cracking, but it wasn't enough. Not yet, I wrote at the top of a fresh page. Final stage. Make her say it herself, because true exposure wouldn't come from me. It would come from her own mouth when the mask finally shattered and the world saw who she really was, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. August bled into September. The air cooled, the trees shifted into fire, and my mother's mask was barely hanging on. I knew because she stopped posting photos, stopped throwing parties, stopped talking to half her friends, but silence wasn't enough. I didn't want her quietly fading into her kingdom of lies. I wanted her unmasked fully, publicly, irreversibly, and the perfect opportunity came wrapped in family tradition. It was Emily who called me. Her voice was hesitant. Claire, I know things have been bad, but Mom insists we all come home for Thanksgiving. She wants to make peace. I laughed. Short, bitter. Make peace? Or save face? Emily didn't answer. Which was an answer. I agreed to come. Because I wasn't the same girl who sat silent at Christmas, bleeding under my own mother's words. This time I was bringing the truth with me. For weeks I collected everything, screenshots of her cruel messages, voicemails where she spit venom, notes from neighbors and friends she'd trashed behind their backs, but the most important piece wasn't evidence. It was her, because my mother's greatest flaw was her pride, and pride can always be provoked. Thanksgiving night, suburban Illinois. Her dining room glowed with candles, the smell of turkey and cinnamon thick in the air. The table was perfect, china plates, crystal glasses, but beneath the shine, tension simmered like a hidden storm. I sat across from her. Her eyes were cold, but her lips were painted into a smile. Claire, she said sweetly, so glad you could make it. My hand stayed steady on my fork. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Mom. Dinner began. Emily made small talk. Daniel bragged about work. My mother laughed, until she couldn't help herself. She set her glass down and looked at me. So, Claire, still living alone? Still wasting that degree? I always say at least the other two turned out right. Emily froze. Daniel looked down. The room went quiet. I breathed in. Slowly. This was it. I leaned forward. Calm, quiet. Funny you'd say that, Mom, because I brought something tonight. Something everyone here should hear. Her smile twitched. What are you talking about? I took my phone from my purse, pressed play, and her own voice filled the dining room. Claire will never be anything. She's weak. She's pathetic. She's an embarrassment to this family. The voicemail. Her words. Undeniable. Emily's fork clattered to her plate.